Anyway, we started in 1968, and it's now, we've been going strong this time, and we are hikers. That's our big thing, and advocates that have helped build, maintain, and promote the responsible use of Tennessee trails. So, part of this story is about how we have changed. And so this is our original logo that was made back in 1968, affectionately known as the Big Dot. And so we have changed since we have gone to our new website. We have changed to a new logo, and we feel like it's more in keeping. It's got a man and a woman. It's got trails. It's got mountains. It's got trees. So we feel like it's more in keeping with our goals, and it's just an updated look. So I want to start though. These are the guys. I'm going to try to make you guys little. There we go. Yeah, these are our three founders. And we trace our origin back to these three, and they come from different places. And some of them will look familiar to you. I bet this guy right here looks familiar to a lot of you. And this is one of our founders. This is Mac Pritchard, and he's from West Tennessee. And he was a naturalist with Tennessee State Parks forever. And he just passed away last year. So he's gone. And then another founder that he was very active in the Sierra Club. And he was active in everything. If it was environmental, Bob was there. And I don't know why that keeps jumping around, but I am very disturbed. Well, this is sad. This is so sad. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm just going to try to use those little buttons instead of various other buttons. Anyway, and that's Bob and his dog Trouble. And I did not realize this when I was doing the research. Bob was a chemical engineer. Then he became a banker. And then he retired to just do full-time environmental stuff. And that's his dog Trouble, who's really just about as famous as Bob. And then here's a fellow not a lot of people know about, but he's been gone. I've met him. He was probably around 2000 was when he passed. But his name is Evan Means, and he was the editor of the outdoor section of the Oak Ridge newspaper. It was I think it was the Oak Ridge Oaklander or something like that. But anyway, they decided that they needed a state trail system that was a lot like the newly formed National Trails System Act that had been signed into law in 1968. So all this was really on the forefront, the trails and national trails. So Bob wanted the opportunity to do some serious hiking without having to go all the way to the Smokies. And then Evan Means, as president of the Clinch and Powell River Valley Association, had proposed a long distance trail from Cumberland Gap to Oak Ridge, and that was to be called the Cumberland Trail. So if you know where Cumberland Gap is, it's up around the Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, right in that little corner area. So that's where they proposed that it start. All right. Now, here we go. These are some of our forefathers, and I also wanted you to meet some of our foremothers, and I wanted you to hear about them because we don't talk about them enough. This was Bob. This was Donald Todd. He was our first state president. This is Robbie Hassler, and we don't hear enough about her. And she was our first secretary, and she kept all the minutes and everything that went on, she kept up with. And then while we're on the subject, our third president, which I cannot find a picture of her anywhere, but our third president was Lily Rose Claiborne, and you can find her on the internet. And she was, it says on the internet that she was a homemaker and environmentalist from Oak Ridge. And I thought, well, that's a good title to have, a homemaker and environmentalist. So that's some of our forefathers and our foremothers. But they got together at Cumberland Mountain State Park in 1968. And Bob says that they were looking into landowner permissions and liabilities and trail design and potential routing. And they were also talking about a statewide system of trails, not just one, but a lot. But they were going to do Cumberland Trail was going to be their pilot project, and they were going to fine tune the process. So they decided at that meeting that they were going to make the southern terminus go all the way to Chattanooga. And they were maybe some side trips to Fall Creek Falls and Scotts Gulf. So they were, that was their goal, was to make it go from, and that was going to be about a 300-mile trail. So later on, they had another meeting at Cove Lake State Park, which on December 7th, 1968, and Bob kept notes, and so did Robbie, about that meeting, and they decided then that they would name our organization Tennessee Trails Association, and that was supposed to be an umbrella organization to coordinate work on a state trail system. And the name Tennessee Trails Association was chosen over Cumberland Trail Association because they wanted to include all these other trails they were going to build. And Bob Brown was elected the very first Tennessee Trails president. So here we are. There's some of our founding fathers again. So in December 6, 1969, as time progressed, the Tennessee Trail leadership recognized the need for a more formal organization. And so that's when they did their constitution and their bylaws, and they set up a newsletter, which we still have today, and it's called the Tennessee Trails Newsletter. And Evan Means was our first editor, but I will tell you, like the second or third editor was Dot Lingerfelter from Chattanooga. So again, she doesn't get mentioned. All we hear about is Evan Means, but you need to know that they were there too. So the first issue of the Tennessee Trails newsletter reported on all the things they did. And then we have some new officers, and one was Donald Todd from Wartburg, and then Bob Brown was going to be our vice president. Now this young man right here, we're going to come back to him in a minute. There's Mac, and there's another founder, Sam Powell. He came on just a little bit later, but he came along. All right. So during this time, Tennessee Trails took a lead in promoting a state trail system. And so they had seminars on state and regional trails, and they brought together government agencies and environmental groups and representatives from the private sector. So they were very busy. And so in April 1971, here's what all that work culminated in. In April 1971, Tennessee became the first state to enact legislation establishing a state trails system. And so they had 7 scenic trails were designated as part of that initial state system, including the Cumberland Trail. And in the meantime, in the midst of all this, they were looking to expand their base of support. And so they started forming these chapters to have local input. And so the national chapter there was another chapter that was formed, and that was never really active. So the national chapter was formed about this same time. And one of our very first projects was the volunteer trail out at Longhunter State Park. And there were a lot of other groups, but we were at the forefront of that. So all was going just great. Initial support from the state after the passage of the State Trail System Act was strong. They had money. They had Joe Gaines was the first state trail administrator. And then they had trail supervisors. And they had them for the Cumberland Trail and several other designated scenic trails. And so the Tennessee Trails annual meeting reports of this period continues to tell of progress being made by both state personnel and Tennessee Trails volunteers. So all is just going great. And it was, and then in 1975, a change in state government administration occurred, and funding to the state trail system was frozen, like put in the deep freeze. So they were having trouble with getting trail easements from the landowners. They were having money trouble, and it was just a change in administration, and they weren't as interested in this. And so together, these factors led to a change of direction within the Department of Conservation. So instead of putting their money into the Cumberland Trail and all these other big ideas, they decided that they were going to shift their focus and go toward the development of recreational trails in existing state parks. So that was kind of a slowdown for sure in the Cumberland Trail. So, I mean, you know, that's a great idea, because what would we do without all our trails in the state parks? But it was dark times for the Cumberland Trail. So now we're going to go back and look at this young man right here. And this is Rob Weber. So Rob decided that we needed to revive this whole idea. You know, we'd lost our state funding, all this stuff had gone away. Well, Rob decided that we needed to revive the whole idea of the Cumberland Trail. So it was going to go from Cumberland Gap to Signal Mountain in Chattanooga. So Rob was the first director of the Cumberland Trail Conference. So, and that was a part, at that time, that was a part of Tennessee Trails. It was an associate organization. So under his leadership, the Cumberland Trail Conference was able to marshal support for the Cumberland Trail from the communities and landowners in 11 counties along the trail route. Rob was a charmer, and he could talk to people and get them excited about the Cumberland Trail. And over the years, Cumberland Trail has been able to attract hundreds of volunteer workers through the annual Breakaway program and other working programs. So Breakaway is when college students give up, well, they don't give it up, they just choose to use their spring break, and sometimes they even have fall breaks, but mostly spring break. They would come down to work on the trail, they would stay in dorms, they would work a lot, and then in the evenings we would have educational activities for them. And I've had the privilege of doing a lot of work with breakaway groups through the years. And a lot of these, we had other volunteers that were all excited about this. We had volunteers from all the Tennessee Trails chapters, and we had Scouts, AmeriCorps, American Hiking Society. And I was wondering if anybody from Sierra Club had ever worked on Breakaway. If so, just jump right on in. Well, so they were raising money. A whole lot of money was raised to buy land along the corridor. And then something different happened. Cumberland Trail Conference entered into a formal agreement with the state and the state of Tennessee, defining the development and maintenance responsibilities of the organization. And so in June of 1998, the Cumberland Trail was designated as a linear state park. So today, the state provides the day-to-day management with park manager Bobby Fulcher and his staff of rangers. And today I tried to find out exactly how many rangers. Nora, do you know how many rangers the Cumberland Trail has? Oh, she's probably muted. That's okay. Anyway, but it's a 300-mile corridor. So there's quite a few, and it's back road, back wilderness. So this happened, the state, it became a state park, and then the Cumberland Trail Conference became an independent organization from Tennessee Trails. Our big overgrown child went off to college and became its own entity, and we still strongly support the Cumberland Trail Conference, and we financially and volunteer efforts from Tennessee Trail members. So a lot of people say, well, did the Cumberland Trail Conference just go away since it became a state park? And the answer is no, they're still there. They took a licking and keeps on ticking with this COVID business and no breakaways and that kind of thing. Breakaways are coming back this year. But the Cumberland Trail Conference is like the trail building arm of Cumberland Trail. And they have state contracts. They have a paid trail builders and state contracts with that. And then they also have a Friends of the Cumberland Trail group. And there are all kinds of trail quarter communities and all this cultural music and Appalachian, semi-Appalachian Cumberland Trail lore, folkways, and all this kind of stuff that needs to be preserved. And so that's kind of the mission of the Friends of the Cumberland Trail. So there's the state park, there's Cumberland Trail Conference, which is the trail builders, and then there's the Friends. So we're still supporting them, and they're still going strong. They get more and more. I would say they're about 3/4 of the way done. Still lots to do. Still have volunteer weekends. Still solicit volunteers from all over. So we started just forming more and more chapters with Tennessee Trails, local chapters. And so we have the Memphis chapter was formed. That was one of the early ones. Here's Murfreesboro came along. And this is one of their premier projects, is the Barfield Crescent Trail, which is a city park, but it's amazingly woodsy and wilderness. And so that's one of their big projects, is to work on that. And here are all our chapters. So we have 12 active chapters. We have all the East Tennessee, West Tennessee, and our newer chapters are the Sumner Trails, which is Hendersonville and Gallatin. And then another newer trail is the Highland Rim. I put this Timberland Park, it's a city park, but it's really cool, in Tullahoma area, Coffee and Franklin counties, and everything in between. Oh, no, that's wrong. I told you wrong. That's Highland Rim. Columbia Franklin is Columbia Franklin. That's them right there. So we still are working on the Cumberland Trail as part of our volunteerism, but we've started another project that I'm super proud of, and that is Means grants. Remember Evan Means back there in the very beginning of the whole thing? He was the newspaper editor. So this grants are in honor of him, and it's to help association, well, any kind of nonprofit association that oh, I had other things to say. Okay, that's all right. Funding for volunteer-based nonprofit groups that feel their request is too small to submit a more formal grant-making organization. So like the big guys, we're like $1,000 or less. Here we are. I'm real proud of this one. It was an ADA trail in a retirement community, and we gave them some money to build the trail. And then here's one project that we completed. Not we, that we gave money for them to complete at Foster Falls, and that stairway takes you down to the bottom of the falls. I skipped a whole bunch of things. I'm going to go back and tell you more about our chapter. Somehow I just jumped right on ahead. I got so excited about Evan Means, but let me tell you about our chapters. Each chapter schedules and conducts its own hikes and outings, and they hold regularly scheduled meetings. And every autumn, this is my favorite, all the chapters come together for a big annual meeting, and that's attended by enthusiastic hikers from all over the state. Tennessee Trail members keep in touch through a monthly newsletter, Tennessee Trails, still the same name, which contains articles about current events, hiking tips, hiking safety, hike reports, volunteer opportunities, and a calendar of upcoming events. Each event listed contains detailed descriptions of when, where, and who to be included. And you can find a selection of our newsletters on the Tennessee Trails website, which I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. All right, so there's our Evan Means grants. Here's some more work. This was an Evan Means grant to Longhunter State Park. And so the National Chapter decided not only did we want to give money, but we wanted to volunteer for the project that we gave the money for. So this is to put blazes on trees at the Bryant Grove Trail. And then here was a chainsaw, which apparently is there as a somebody's dream. It's called an arborist chainsaw. So they would not let anybody, any of us touch that saw, just that one person got to touch the saw. But anyway, this was really fun. And there's Carol, who's in it with our meeting tonight. Anyway, it was a fun morning, a fun day over even at Longhunter State Park. So we got to use the tools that we bought them to do their project. So that was really fun. So this is another project that we, it's an ongoing hiking opportunity. And this is the Fran Wallace Hike Them All program, and it honors the memory of Fran Wallace. Here's Fran. Some of you may know Fran. She was in another one of these that was into everything. And she was an attorney, and she was a trail advocate with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And she was also an active member of Tennessee Trails for many years. So Fran loved to hike and authored a series of 36 articles for the Tennessee Conservationist magazine about her favorite hiking trails in Tennessee state parks. So after her death, Fran's articles were collected in the 2011 publication, Great Hikes in Tennessee State Parks. And so this Fran Wallace Hike Them All program involves a patch. So you get this when you start your journey. And then when you get all 36, you get the little rocker that goes with it. So that's one of our programs that we encourage people to use. So one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is the changes in hiking through the years. So as far as I know, this was the very first trail book. And this was Evan Means. Remember him back from the beginning? Evan Means was the very first author of this. And then I have the 5th edition. And it's pretty much obsolete now because, you know, these things just change. But I'm really glad to have this. And so after Evan Means passed away, Bob Brown, another founder, took it over. But here's just a selection of all the various things. And, you know, they just go out of date so fast anymore. So now there's all kinds of apps and this and that about hiking. There's all trails and all these other kinds of digital things. But here's the thing. If you're going hiking, don't you want to look at the scenery instead of your phone? I don't know. So don't be this girl. Look around and take in the scenery. Don't be that girl. So here's some of our changes in Tennessee Trails. We have a brand spanking new website that's just the bomb. And we have a nice national chapter has their own Facebook, and then Tennessee the whole state organization has a Facebook. And then you can just put your camera up. You know how that works, to those little things, and it'll take you right to it. But we invite you to check out our Facebook page. We invite you to check out our website. We're real proud of it. So our digital presence. So somebody said, you know, Tennessee Trails was the first hiking club in Tennessee. Well, no, not exactly. And there are 2 other groups that we need to just remember and talk about, and they're still around. And one of them's very much active is the Smoky Mountain Hiking Club. and they are formed in 1924. So they were like 50 years ahead of us, just about, in Knoxville to promote the idea of a national park. They were like the first promoters of the Smoky Mountains National Park. And then another park was the Tennessee Eastman Hiking and Canoe Club, and that was up in Johnson City in that area in 1946. And at first it started out just being an company employee club, and then it was open to the general public, which is a good thing because I think Tennessee Eastman, I know Eastman Kodak's gone. So I need to check on them to see if they're still with us. And there were lots of other little hiking clubs around, and they did attract a lot of people. But we were discussing this the other day. I guess Gary and I were discussing that, we see a lot of people at trailheads, and maybe they're not in hiking groups. Most hikers are with family or friends. Another phenomenon that's really come up lately is the meetup groups. And if you check, outdoor and adventure is the top ranking meetup community nationwide. So, and we were also discussing about how many women in Tennessee Trails. I would say it's 3/4 women, because we like having people to hike with, and we feel safer and better about it. But it's much more than that. It's just an enjoyable experience, and it's just something that, it's a social activity as well as hiking and as well as building trails. And another big change that we have is the friends groups, Tennessee State Park friends groups. And these groups help not only with trails, but other recreational areas in the parks. So here's another change I noticed. The boots have changed, the clothes have changed, the food has changed, the backpacking, all that equipment has changed. And then there's, of course, so many trails now that we didn't used to have. And then the trails are in better shape because of Tennessee Trails, because of Cumberland Trail, because of friends groups, and just park rangers having more knowledge and more funding for trails. So we're very fortunate to have that. But I noticed all of these sticks. Back when I very first started, I would look carefully for a tree limb before I set out on the trail to have, so I wouldn't fall down and break my neck. So everybody these days has these sticks. So that's a big difference too. But the challenge for Tennessee Trails Association, we have 600 members now, just about, not quite, almost, maybe by the end of the year. We always have a surge in January. Everybody gets the fitness buzz. The challenge for Tennessee Trails Association is to be relevant to a new generation of hikers and work cooperatively with other groups to enjoy the hiking experience. Like, I'm just so glad to be talking to Sierra Club today. And I just want to, and all the other groups and the meetup groups and the friends and through our grants and all these other things, we are reaching out to other groups. And I just feel like that's the main goal for these days and these times. We want to teach people about how to take care of the trails they hike, and we want to encourage them to get involved with trail building, maintenance, and cleanup projects. And we look forward to the next 54 years. And I was telling Gary, I stole most all of this stuff that I shared with you from Jim Poteet, who has written 2 articles for the Tennessee Conservationist. And then Doug Burroughs wrote a lot of this stuff on the website. And I want to thank him for all of his, the content of it. And I put one of Doug's favorite parks is Bell's Bend at the end.